West Coast launch cadence reaching its 50th flight this year shows how Vandenberg infrastructure is sustaining overall flight rate while East Coast pads slow. This is SpaceX Daily, episode 64. This week brought continued focus on SpaceX launch operations across multiple sites, advances in Grok model integrations, and developments in the NVIDIA ecosystem supporting AI infrastructure. Listeners following Starship saw updates on upcoming test flights and reuse goals. On the compute side, discussions around XAI and related expansions highlighted the growing demand for training capacity. SpaceX completed its 50th launch from Vandenberg Space Force Base this year. The milestone comes as East Coast operations from Florida and Texas have reduced tempo in recent weeks. Multiple Starlink missions have driven the West Coast count higher than prior years at the same point. The site's SLC-4 and SLC-6 pads continue to support rapid Falcon 9 turnarounds. Observers note the split cadence helps maintain overall launch volume despite regional constraints. The 50th flight used a Falcon 9 configuration already proven on prior Starlink deployments. A Falcon 9 lifted off from Vandenberg and deployed 24 Starlink satellites into low Earth orbit. The mission used a previously flown booster on its return to flight after inspection. Onboard cameras captured the second stage separation and satellite deployment sequence. The satellites will join the existing constellation and begin initial orbit-raising burns. The second stage performed a controlled re-entry burn after payload release. The latest Starlink mission from California extended the site's consecutive launch streak. Ground crews achieved a rapid pad turnaround between recent flights at SLC-4. The booster performed a downrange landing on the drone ship. Telemetry confirmed nominal performance across all 9 Merlin engines. Recovery teams reported the booster arrived safely aboard the drone ship for inspection. A Falcon 9 lifted off from Vandenberg Saturday morning, carrying Starlink satellites. The mission marked the site's continued high flight rate. Recovery teams positioned the drone ship for booster landing. All deployment milestones were reported successful. The first stage separation occurred at the expected altitude, with full telemetry lock maintained. A Falcon 9 is scheduled to lift off from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station on the first day of the local school year. The mission will carry another batch of Starlink satellites. Launch timing has been set to avoid peak school traffic windows near the causeways. Public viewing areas remain open with standard safety closures. Ground teams coordinated with local authorities to manage road closures around the expected liftoff window. Kurdistan regional government officials confirmed ongoing discussions with SpaceX for Starlink rollout. The talks focus on regulatory approvals and ground infrastructure needs. Service would target underserved areas in northern Iraq. No timeline or contract value has been released. Local regulators are reviewing spectrum allocation requirements before any service authorization. XAI filed to support federal efforts limiting citizen suits against large infrastructure projects. The move targets regulatory challenges facing data center construction. The Trump administration has signaled alignment on expedited permitting. XAI's position emphasizes compute capacity needs for model training. The brief argues that extended litigation delays critical power and cooling infrastructure timelines. CoreWeave signed leases for additional AI-focused data center capacity. The facilities will house GPU clusters for large-scale training workloads. Power and cooling specifications align with next-generation accelerator racks. The expansion supports growing demand from AI developers. The new sites are sized for multi-megawatt power feeds required by dense compute racks. Astronaut Anil Menon shared video of aurora displays captured through a Dragon spacecraft window during a recent mission. The footage shows green and purple bands visible from low Earth orbit. Community discussion on the 50th West Coast launch tracked booster reuse counts across the streak. Several users posted side-by-side images of the same Falcon 9 first stage on consecutive missions. Worth keeping an eye on the Falcon 9 upper stage from an earlier mission that struck the lunar surface, renewing debate over long-term orbital debris tracking. The impact created a new crater and was captured by a South Korean orbiter. Improved end-of-life disposal protocols would reduce similar future events. The stage followed its planned trajectory until the final deorbit burn, after which contact was lost as expected. On the AI front, xAI entered the legal effort to limit citizen suits against major infrastructure builds, citing the need for faster data center permitting. The filing aligns with administration priorities on compute expansion. The brief highlights how prolonged permitting cycles directly affect the timeline for bringing new training clusters online. CoreWeave expanded its leased AI data center footprint to accommodate additional GPU racks for training clusters. Power delivery and cooling designs target high-density accelerator deployments. The leases include provisions for future rack upgrades that match the power and thermal profiles of next-generation GPUs. From an engineering standpoint, Falcon 9's repeated West Coast flights illustrate how reuse economics scale when infrastructure and vehicle margins align. Each booster flight reuses the same 9 Merlin engines, whose turbopump and chamber assemblies represent the highest cost elements per launch. If raw material and propellant costs alone set the floor, the per-flight expense would collapse to the price of RP1 and liquid oxygen plus minimal refurbishment. The actual multiplier above that floor is the idiot index created by inspection, transport, and regulatory overhead. By concentrating 50 missions at Vandenberg this year, SpaceX amortizes fixed pad and range costs across more flights, shrinking that index without changing the engines themselves. The same logic applies to the second stage. Its single Merlin vacuum engine flies once per mission, yet the stage's avionics and tank hardware benefit from the high cadence because production learning curves steepen when units move through the factory faster. Continued growth in West Coast rate therefore depends less on new engine designs and more on whether range scheduling and booster refurbishment throughput can keep the index from rising again. The 50th Vandenberg launch also highlights how pad turnaround time directly governs the idiot index for the entire stack. When a booster returns from a drone ship landing, the interval until the next flight is dominated by inspection hours, not propellant loading or engine ignition sequences. Each additional day spent on the pad adds fixed labor and range support costs that cannot be amortized across more flights unless cadence rises. SpaceX has reduced that interval at SLC-4 by standardizing post-flight checks across the Merlin fleet, effectively lowering the multiplier between raw hardware cost and delivered orbit. The second stage separation event captured on the recent mission further shows that the vacuum-optimized nozzle and propellant management systems maintain consistent performance even after dozens of prior flights on the same booster family. This consistency keeps the per kilogram cost of the upper stage closer to its material floor than would be possible with lower flight rates. West Coast infrastructure choices also affect the thermal and structural margins that enable rapid reuse. SLC-4's coastal location provides natural cooling for pad flame trenches during successive launches, reducing the need for extended cool-down periods between missions. That environmental advantage compounds with the booster's octagonal interstage design, which routes aerodynamic loads away from the 9-engine cluster and allows quicker ground handling. As the year's 50th flight demonstrates, these combined factors keep the overall idiot index for Falcon 9 operations trending downward even while East Coast pads operate at reduced tempo. The next measurable improvement will appear when turnaround times at SLC-4 drop below the current average without any increase in inspection staffing. Before we go, the next measurable improvement at SLC-4 could appear when turnaround times drop below the current average without added inspection staffing. And that's a wrap on today's SpaceX developments. SPCX is trading at $133.11, up 16.3%. Share this with a fellow spaceflight fan if you found it useful, and subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's episode. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. See you next time. Quick tip from the network. Try the Do Positive Pod next. Good news in science and tech, plus one concrete action you can take. Every NARA Network show is free at naranetwork.com. Following the long arcs, Story trackers on naranetwork.com follow major programs across episodes: Tesla, SpaceX, AI, space science, and more. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.